Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever thought about how the way we fight has shaped, well, literally everything? From the stone hand axes of our earliest ancestors right up to today's artificial intelligence algorithms, the story of human civilization is totally tangled up with the evolution of combat tools. So buckle up for this explainer, because we are going to completely reframe how you look at history. To kick things off, let's drop right into the dusty trenches of the Middle East. Picture this: Jericho, roughly 8,000 BCE. Archaeologists digging there found these massive fortifications. We're talking walls 13 feet thick, an imposing watchtower, and a huge moat carved directly into solid bedrock. But wait, here's the crazy catch. Organized, state-level armies? Yeah, they didn't even exist yet. So why on earth would ancient humans, who are really just figuring out basic agriculture, expend such vast amounts of back-breaking labor to build all this? It's completely overkill if the goal was just to keep out the random, disorganized raiding parties of the Neolithic era. Well, this brings us to a really fascinating theory from archaeologist Rand Barkai. He argues that these massive structures weren't actually just for physical defense. They were built to create awe and inspiration. It's like a giant psychological tool, right? The idea is that these monumental walls were designed to convince people to accept the harder, highly structured way of life that came with early farming and brand new social hierarchies. So it wasn't just about keeping enemies out, it was about keeping society together. Section 1. Redefining military technology. You know, that ancient anomaly in Jericho is the perfect setup for our macro history of warfare, because it proves military tech is deeply tied to our psychology and social structures. To guide us through all this, we're grounding our explainer in a truly comprehensive academic text, A Global History of Warfare and Technology by Kaushik Roy. This source does an absolutely incredible job of dismantling long-held assumptions. It's going to help us zoom out and look at the entire globe, rather than just one region, to see how warfare and technology co-evolved over millennia. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is Kaushik Roy's core definition, which completely reframes how we think about this stuff. Military technology isn't just the hardware. It's not just the physical sword or the tank or the drone. It is the absolutely crucial fusion of that hardware with the software. And by software, we don't mean computer code. We mean the ideas, the tactics, the training, and the strategic application of those physical tools. Think about it. A chariot is totally useless without the combined arms tactics to deploy it effectively. True innovation only happens when the hardware and the software perfectly align. Section 2. Beasts, Bronze, and Iron. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds. As humanity shifted into agrarian economies, massive food surpluses allowed for something new, a dedicated military profession, and that sparked a relentless, high-stakes arms race. Around 3000 BCE, the Bronze Age unleashed the terror of the war chariot, these fast, shock-and-awe weapons that totally dominated the battlefields. But skip forward to 750 BCE, and those super expensive chariots were basically rendered obsolete by the early Iron Age. Why? Because cheaper, much more abundant iron meant you could equip huge armies of disciplined, heavy infantry. Then, jump to 400 CE, and the paradigm shifts all over again. Medieval steppe cavalry easily outpaces those slow-moving foot soldiers. It's essentially a constant game of rock, paper, scissors, but on a civilizational scale. Now, as we look at this evolution, we really need to call out and address a very persistent historical myth. There's this Eurocentric view that assumes a straight, unbroken line of military superiority starting from classical Greece directly to the modern West. But the global reality, it is much different and way more complex. For centuries, the absolute most significant military technical innovations were actually happening in Asia. We're talking advanced maritime tech, the unstoppable cavalry of the steppe nomads, and the expansive Islamic ecumen, or shared civilization. So long story short, the West was absolutely not always leading the charge. In fact, let's look at the absolute masterclass of the era, the steppe nomadic warriors. From Attila the Hun to Chinggis Khan, these nomadic horsemen literally rewrote the software and hardware of war. By pioneering specialized riding gear like the saddle, bridles, and most importantly, the crucial invention of the stirrup, combined with the devastating power of the composite bow, they were able to ride roughshod over massive, heavily armored sedentary empires like Rome and China. Their unique ecological setting made them unparalleled masters of this highly specific technology. Section 3. Gunpowder and Western rise. So that begs the question, when did the global balance of power finally start to shift? Well, that happens between 1450 and 1770 CE.
But, and this is key, this shift wasn't just some preordained destiny. The West's rise was actually driven by a very specific set of circumstances. First off, Western Europe was geographically shielded from those devastating steppe nomadic threats that constantly harassed the Asian empires. Second, the geographic push for Atlantic expansion spurred a ton of new innovations. And third, there was this critical fusion of gunpowder weapons with an emerging system of commercial capitalism. So, it was a mix of geography, politics, and a massive influx of capital-intensive firepower that actually changed the world.
And this brilliantly illustrates the maritime side of things. Before 1500 CE, Mediterranean powers relied super heavily on oared galleys, which were really only suited for inland seas. Meanwhile, over in the Indian Ocean and China, they were already building massive, complex sailing ships equipped with watertight compartments and advanced rudders. To put that into perspective, at that time, only China and India maintained true blue water navies that were actually capable of surviving the deep open ocean.
Section 4. The Age of Industrial War.
Okay, moving forward, the fusion of commercial capitalism and massive firepower eventually birthed an entirely new, genuinely terrifying era, fueled by factories, steel, and mass mobilization. And we need a quick reality check here because these technological shifts have deeply tragic human stakes. 35 million. Let that sink in. That is the sobering, staggering number of war-related deaths estimated just between the years 1945 and 1980 alone. We always have to remember that as the hardware of war becomes more efficient and mechanized, the cost is invariably paid in unimaginable numbers of human lives. The actual sequence of these hardware innovations was incredibly rapid. Step 1. We move from inaccurate, smoothbore muskets to deadly long-range rifles. Step 2. The brutal introduction of machine guns and heavy howitzers, which totally defined the miserable trench warfare of World War I. Step 3. The internal combustion engine gives us tanks and airplanes. Suddenly, combat expands from just the land and sea right up into the third dimension of the sky. And finally, Step 4. The absolute peak of industrial destruction: nuclear technology. Yet, the introduction of nuclear weapons created a really strange paradox. Mutually assured destruction basically meant that massive industrial wars between Western nations became practically suicidal. So instead, the focus shifted dramatically. The post-World War era became completely defined by attritional small wars. Non-state actors started using cheap, light, handheld automatic weapons to engage in highly effective, unconventional guerrilla conflicts. And surprisingly, these tactics often entirely neutralized the heavy, capital-intensive armies of the West. Section 5. AI and the Future. So now we're moving out of the era of heavy iron and steel and straight into the modern information age, where silicon computer chips have officially replaced the old machinery of war. And the crucial point here is the terrifying duality of today's digital landscape. Literally, the exact same technological advancements we use for peaceful entertainment, commerce, and connecting with friends globally are simultaneously forging a brand new arsenal. We are looking at lethal autonomous weapon systems, or LAWS, incredibly advanced unmanned drones, autonomous underwater vehicles, and artificial intelligence making split-second combat decisions. The boundary between civilian and military tech, it's completely dissolved. And that leaves us with a final, lingering question to ponder: the Skynet syndrome. As we engineer machines that are capable of autonomous targeting and lethal action without any human intervention, are we actively setting the stage for an AI-initiated disaster? How do we possibly maintain ethical command over these lethal autonomous weapons systems? It's a profound, kind of scary challenge that proves the intertwined history of warfare and technology is far from over. In fact, its most critical and perhaps most dangerous chapter is being written right now. Thanks for joining us for this explainer. I hope it gave you lots to think about.